Ladies and gentlemen, it is currently November 25th again, and, excuse me, it's Day 9 Daily number 24 again, and apparently we were trying to combat some serious lag last time, because I tried to show off my IGF game submission. I identified the window that was lagging it, and of course when I closed it, it ended up crashing. So I'm going to try to give that one more shot. We've been going on for 5 minutes. I just really want to show this off because I've killed myself to do this game. Alright. This game has been my blood and sweat and tears for the last however long. Alright, I'm just going to double check if it is still lagging. It looks to be alright. Everything looks to be fine at this point in time. So let's go ahead and scroll on over here. So yeah, so it should be running extremely smoothly right now. Oh my god, that looks so good, yeah. Okay, so, as you'll notice, a standard 2D platformer. First of all, appreciate the art. This is all done by me and one other guy. I did the coding and the physics work, and he did all the art, like everything, animations, and so on and so forth. So the idea is, we love 2D platformers, right? 2D platformers are awesome. They haven't made enough of them. And also, I love speedruns. Like, if you've ever seen games like Half-Life 1 speedrun really, really quickly, it's really fun to watch. So we wanted to make a game that was all about like mobility and manipulation of the environment and doing like speedrunning techniques. So I'm just wandering along some sick rotating platforms. That way we can get to the cool part. Oh man, we submitted this to the Independent Games Festival and it looks sweet. You can play it too because we'll eventually have a submission on TeamLiquid.net that you can play. Look at it, he even looks around when you're just hanging out. Oh, fuck yeah. So here's some traditional falling platforms. Ah! And check this out. If you fall and die, bam, resets instantly. No load times. We don't like load times in games, so I went ahead and eliminated that. The flickety-flam-flam. So, yeah, so we do these sorts of things where we're jumping around. And you'll notice so far everything is just very standard platformer mechanics. Man, that animation is great. But look, we have a gun, and look at the specular on that. That looks like something from BioShock. Oh, yeah. This is where it gets fun. Now you just blow shit open, right? And the thing about this gun, yeah, blow stuff up, is that it doesn't do any damage. It does no damage whatsoever, but it just boosts you. So, for instance, look, you can rocket jump. No longer do you have to worry about your health in the game. That's just part of it. And you can blow boxes up and see physics manipulate. Oh, so cool. And what's really sweet about this is the fact that, with this nice little system, you can actually do these really fun physics puzzles. Like, look, we have flippy platforms. And you can launch yourself, like, way high and way far and way fast and stuff like this. Trying to get to maybe some cooler stuff in a minute, but oh, you have to be careful because if you do stuff like that, then you launch yourself off, and it becomes like incredibly fun. And really, this is the entire game. Like there are really no additional mechanics that we've incorporated for this level, that is, but there's just so much that you can do with these. Like, look, I can jump down here to get to this spot, but you know what? I want to jump up here. Let's see if I can do it. Oh! Well, actually, by the way, that's actually a bug. I'm not gonna lie. That actually is a bug, the fact that I flew that high. 1 out of every 1,000 times, for some reason, it multiplies the force by like 400. No idea why, just gonna deal with it. So, anyways, you can do stuff like just shoot behind yourself to accelerate. Yeah, and it's so sweet. And that's like, we specifically designed these puzzles. Oh yeah, see, there's the bug again. I flew like 1,000,000 miles an hour. Yeah, that's the, what was I gonna say? Yeah, we designed these levels so that way, it allows you to do that sort of like speedrunning, glitching sort of stuff, but that it wouldn't break anything, so you can't skip huge portions of it. It's all part of the actual fundamental gameplay. So, you know, this is the part, you see these platforms are spinning so slowly, and I always want to jump like really fast and do something like this and just keep launching myself around, but it's so easy just to kill yourself. Oh, like that. But it's so tempting because it's so fun. I cannot tell you how fun it is to still play this game, even though I've been working on it like nonstop for 2 months. And you have to dodge boxes. Oh man, it's so cool to dodge boxes. You'll note how we don't really have that many textures, so we kind of keep reusing the same old textures again and again. But you know, ain't no thing. All right, I'm almost done with this. I'm almost done. I've been doing this for just like 5 minutes or so. So no big deal. God, that animation looks so good. Yeah, knocking stuff over, blowing open doors. Here's another respawn point. Poof, blowing those open. Uh-oh. Look at this. Oh, it's a free rotating platform, so we can do all sorts of fun stuff like this. Yeah, we can run along this. And uh-oh, I gotta... Whoopsie daisies. I accidentally shot the wrong platform. Fuck! Dude, I got this. I can't lose at my own game. I can't. There's too many people watching. For those of you who just tuned in, this is the game that I made with my partner for the Independent Games Festival submission. So we gotta shoot this while we're bouncing on this bad boy. Go, go, go. Yeah! Zooming around. Zooming around. So here's my favorite part of the game, where you do these long jumps where you have to, like, jump and then fly far. Whoops. I fucked up. Yeah, you shoot these walls. Bam! Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so fun. Alright, sweet. But that's gonna be all for the game right now. But I'm, like, super pumped. I want to get in the top 10, because if I do, I'll be very famous, and I'll be very, very cool. Yeah. And always wanted to make just a fun, simple little platformer like that, because I spent so long doing things like Mario and like Castlevania as a kid that I've always wanted more of that. And for some reason, everyone just thought that 3D came around and that's it, and you got to do 3D. But I love platformers because you can like see everything that's going around there. And I fell in love with speedrunning, and so really, yeah, that's kind of how that game sprang up. But, of course, we must go back to the game that we all know and love. We must return to our roots of StarCraft and discuss Anytime vs. Hyuk, another player who I love quite a bit. For those of you who don't know who Anytime is, I'm going to go ahead and mute-a-roo-a-roo this chat. For those of you who don't know who Anytime is, and actually all of you do know who Anytime is, but the game that really blew everyone's mind is that Anytime qualified for the Star League. It was his first Star League ever. It was so intense that I have to drink some water. This is the SO1 Star League, in case any of you want to look up this game, and you should. So the map was R Point, and Anytime opens up with a 1-based fast gas. This is one of his first games in his first Star League. It's in the round of 16. He's against old school Yellow, not Yellow ARNC, but like the real Yellow, who miraculously beat Boxer a few days ago. But yeah, so Anytime was at the top right of R Point, and he opens up with 1 base fast gas. At the bottom left, we have Yellow, who opens up with 12 hatch in base, which was standard at that point in time, especially on R Point, because the positions were very, very close. And Anytime just rushes for Dark Templar, or rushes for Templar Archives, and then goes 3 Gateway Dark Templar, and kills Yellow with only Dark Templar. Not even like snuck a Dark Templar in and killed some drones. We're talking like attacked the front with 7 Dark Templar and 3 Zealots and just broke it. It was so sweet to watch. And ever since then, I've loved watching how just really innovative Anytime is, and how he just uses a really, probably one of the widest gamuts of play we've really seen from any Protoss player. So I always love watching his games. Always bums me out when he loses, because I just want him to win so bad. But I'm doing a lot of talking and not focusing on StarCraft, so let's just briefly go over and look at the screen. I'm going to ignore most of this because I have seen this game. All we want to say is that Anytime spawns right here, and Hyuk spawns right here. So let's just stop right there and allow me to digress. A lot of the time what I do, and actually virtually all the time what I do when I look at these games, is that I look at the map, and I talk about mid-game plans and mid-game strategies, and that really is the fundamental basis for strong long-term play. This game's interesting because it's an early game strategy that ends up winning it. So what I want to do is I want to focus a lot on the early game. So that way we can just sort of get that out of the way, so we can have these sorts of thoughts. So I'm spawning here, and my opponent is spawning here. So, let's say I'm Hyuk, let's say I'm Zerg. Because, believe it or not, that is a race I have been known to play every now and again. So I spawn up here. I'm tempted to send my first Overlord towards the center, because this is such prime spot to proxy gate. We saw we saw Pure do that against S2. I always confuse S2 and Hyuk. But yeah, we saw Pure proxy 2-gate here and gave S2 a bunch of trouble in the early game. We have really wide open, it's wide-ish open. It's pretty easy to defend these expansions, but you have a fairly wide open ramp. It's easy to contain, I would say. Looking at other tactics, this ridge actually is really droppable. Like for Zerg, like again, if I'm Zerg up here, I'm worried about this ridge. So that's something that's a little bit noteworthy. There's not a lot of weird abuses you can do with lurker drops or anything like that, so those sorts of things are sort of out of question, but this is a thing I'm going to say. In all games, especially nowadays, there's this incredibly, I almost want to say a rigid standard. And it's slowly breaking down, as normally happens in StarCraft, every time something gets very standardized. But I mean, in Zerg versus Protoss, Protoss early expands, and Zerg double expands and goes straight for layer. This is just like what you do in this matchup. And what a new Zerg player thinks about is, well, how do I deal with, if my opponent goes Corsairs and then does a Zealot Archon push? What if he goes for a Zealot push early? What if my opponent goes for a whole bunch of Corsairs and goes Corsair Reaver? These are the sorts of things that most low-level Protosses do. Appropriately so. These are all good questions because they lead to the mid-game. The problem is that we toss out the other two very distinct strategies that Protoss can do. Protoss really has 3 openings against Zerg. Fast gas, 2-gate, and early expand. And anytime you do a strategy, you got to account for all these 3 things. Because you can't deal with what's standard. Yeah, 90% of Protosses are going to early expand, but what if you go to a tournament and you play against a player who's one of those 5% who goes for 2 gates, or one of those 5% who goes for fast gas? You need to make sure you don't lose against them. And they are very viable, very strong openings for Protoss. You can't just hope to do something like, well, I'm just going to kind of wing it and try to do what I do against a fast expanding player. It's not going to work. You're going to get crushed. So I want to just say those 3 things right off the bat before we get into the game. 2-gate, fast gas, and early expand. So let's go ahead and move right back over to the screen. And now that we are 11 minutes into the cast, we are going to be beginning this game. I wanted to have a lot of stuff that happened before the game. I wanted to do definitely show off the indie game because Daniel and I killed ourselves to do that. But also the fact that this is a short game allows me to get a little bit more filler time, and there's a lot of important things to note about the early game. Because, as you probably heard me say before, in my map analysis of Fighting Spirit, things tend to converge in the mid-game. There's not that many different permutations that go on in the mid-game, but there's a lot of permutations that go on in the early game. So right now we have Protoss. We have the Protoss hero anytime, early expanding. Yeah, you hear those gateways warping in. It's so awesome. And see, we have the scout to the center, trying to account for that early possibility of 2 gates. I'm going to be talking a lot about openings in this game, about lots of things that could be happening at the start. I talk so much about the broad strategy, and correctly so. I think I'm totally awesome for doing that. But it's equally important to find examples of games that illustrate how critical the early game is, and to talk about this. So right now, I'm Zerg. I see this probe scout. I know. These are the things that I think about. My opponent is either at the bottom right and early expanded because he went boom, boom like this, and that's why that probe's there so early. Or, as we'll see, or my Protoss opponent scouted after he built his gateway. Like this. And he is either right next to me. So I've already narrowed down some possibilities just from seeing that. Just by seeing that, I'm going, okay, early expander here or aggressor here or here. Not particularly fun information, I want to say, because he's either far away and expanding, and I'm not really going to be able to do anything about it, so I want to make drones, or he's going to be really close and doing something aggressive, and I don't want to make drones. It's not the most useful information. I'm not going to do some huge twist on it, but it's a very useful thing to identify because already I know so much about my Protoss opponent just from that. And it's good to know because, frankly, the number one reason why you'll end up panicking in a game and make mistakes is because you're worried about all the possibilities that your opponent could be doing. You're just scared of what you don't know. And really, you should be focusing a lot more on doing these little techniques that will allow you to just have a good idea. So we have the scout going on from Zerg. It appears that he's seen something with this drone. I wasn't focusing too much on the minimap, and I'm not going to be doing too much rewinding more. But we see that he moved up here, and now he's beelining for the bottom left position. So clearly, based on that timing, he knew his opponent scouted after a gateway and was either here or here. I don't have the timing quite down to know when a Protoss player goes pylon first at expansion and then moves there or there, but they feel about the same. That's something that I would go back and research. These are things that these are things that I used to know, but because I haven't been playing, those are all the facts that fall out of my head immediately. is all these little timings, and it's really annoying because I've relearned them like 5,000 times and then forgotten them again. I always sort of kick myself when I start playing again. But anyways, so now I'm starting to be a little bit concerned about a 2-gate. Just ever so slightly concerned. So, did the Zerg cancel down there? So it looks like the Zerg was doing some scouting, probably checking for some proxies. Maybe he was getting ready to expand. This is a very, very weirdly timed gas. So what I'm seeing right here is this Zerg player. I mean, normally if you were just going gas off 2 hatch, you'd have gotten it earlier on. But what probably happened was Zerg was thinking to himself, you know what, I'm going to try to scout around with this drone. I'm probably going to try to expand, or actually it's this drone down here, but I wanted to circle a drone just so everyone knows what I'm talking about. He was probably thinking, you know, I'm going to scout around with a drone, you know, so that way I can expand if my opponent's expanding. But if he's not early expanding, I'm going to get this way late gas, sort of as a choppy backup plan. And all these larvae have been saved up, almost certainly for Zerglings, because again, we're worried about that possibility of 2-gate. Here is the first drone to really get a sense of what's going on in the Protoss' base. So, I'm already pretty certain, as a Zerg player, that my opponent is not 2-gating me. I do know that he's 1-basing me, and he's almost certainly going for fast gas. It would be weird if he did a 1-gate, 1-base strategy that didn't involve gas, right? Because, again, the 3 distinct possibilities, 2-gate, 1-gate fast gas, or early expand. Now, we have another little split. My early gassing opponent can be doing, I want to say about 4 or 5 different things. Let me just list all the possibilities out. Going fast Corsair in some fashion, which would almost certainly lead into some sort of Templar expand. He could be going for Reaver and doing some early push or early drop, or he could be going for Zealot legs. In other words, I have 1 finger for each of the structures you can build after you get a cybernetics core. The fourth one that's slightly less probable, but definitely is there, is if your opponent goes 1-gate fast gas and then adds on 2 gateways, gets Dragoon range, and does a really fast Dragoon push. It's actually kind of a pain in the ass to deal with, especially if you're on a very open map, something like Rush Hour, where your expansion has quite a large area it's trying to defend. But notice how I'm splitting things off. So in my head, I've already shooed away 2 gates and 2 gates and early expands, and now these are the possibilities that I'm accounting for. So if we go back to this game, as a Zerg player, I'm thinking I need to be able to hold off air if he's going Corsairs. I need to have enough Sunkens at my front if he goes for some sort of fast Zealot leg push or Dragoon push. I need to have some Hydralisk lying around, maybe to deal with the Reaver, or maybe some air to deal with the Reaver. I need to also make sure my economy's not too screwed, so that way I can deal with some sort of 1-gate fast Templar early expand without Corsairs. So, honestly, the way that you generally end up dealing with fast gas, given all of those possibilities, is generally, if you've gone for 3 hatches early on, and you see this fast gas, you make a lot of drones, and you get Hydralisks pretty quickly, and you tech to a layer pretty quickly. So what happens is you get Hydralisk and get speed, and then get the layer before you get range. I think that's a very reasonable choice. Because now we have Hydras to deal with the Corsairs, and we only need like 6 or so Hydras to deal with an early Reaver drop. And if we keep a good scout on our opponent, we can get a few extra Sunkens and the additional Hydralisks we need to hold off any sort of early push. And by getting the layer so quickly, we can punish early Reaver pushes by getting our Spire appropriately quickly. You kind of barely hold off the push, and then your Spire pops out, and you can do some sort of counter aggression. Also, by getting Hydralisks, we can deal with things like Dark Templar. We're getting the layer still reasonably fast, so we can get speed overlords if he goes fast gas. Notice how I'm saying that we go for Hydralisk early, and then we go for a layer, so that way we can make decisions to deal with each one of these things. We don't do the exact same thing against a fast Reaver. We don't do the exact same thing against a fast Templar player. But what we do is we open the exact same way against them. We open up with the Hydralisks first, and then the layer slightly later, and then flow into whatever we need to. So again, doing a lot of stopping and pausing in this game to account for all these possibilities. Already, as Zerg, I'm pissed off that I built so many Zerglings. I'm going, oh god, if I were watching this and this were my own replay, I would say to myself, man, I really, really needed to figure out a way to hold off an early push from one Zealot from one gate, while still not making too many Zerglings. I need to figure out some good way to scout, so that way I don't make so many Zerglings that you can't do a damn thing at this stage. Because really making 8 Zerglings early on as opposed to 4 Zerglings and 2 drones, that's a pretty significant difference, especially at that stage in the game. So we do see any time going for Reavers, but I want to talk so much about what's going on from the Zerg's point of view, because of all the things I'm worrying about. I actually am going to back it up just a little bit. Gonna squeeze back a touch. Okay, so look already how weird this looks. And if it looks weird, it probably is. I mean, so we have this, whoa, full screen YouTube. We have this extractor that was timed weirdly, right? This is the extractor Hyuk sort of got weirdly late. You know, he got it like right as his pool was finishing. And I get the timing of this extractor. Basically what Hyuk is saying is that I need gas so I can research speed for my Zerglings here, because the most typical way to deal with 2-gate pressure is to get a lot of Zerglings with speed early. Speed helps a lot with 2 gates. So we're going to get this gas right here, so we can deal with that. But the problem is, all of a sudden we saw on the mini-map here that our opponent had his front walled and was not getting 2 gates. So what do we do now? Well, I guess I don't need gas. Okay, I guess I need to get more minerals. I need to get this hatch. And Hyuk is, we're going to see that, you know, he has some of the good outline, right? He's getting the Hydralisk den, so that way we can hold off Corsairs and potentially Reavers and deal with any of that weird, obnoxious, sort of harassy style stuff. But it feels a little bit bumpy. From Protoss' point of view, on the other hand, let's actually take a minute to look at this map. From Protoss' point of view, we open up with some pressure. We're thinking, I want to get my opponent to be low on economy, and then I'm going to tech straight to a Reaver push, because it's just a very stable early push. It's not something that relies too much on getting lucky. It relies on just bashing down the front. And the best way to have a very weakened front is to do some sort of harassment early on with Zealots. Alternatively, if you wanted to go Reavers, you could do something like open up with a Stargate. And then you could push out with Corsairs, and then your opponent has to get Hydralisks way earlier, and he loses some Overlords, and then that costs him money, weakens his defense, and then when the Reaver push shows up, it's proportionally weak. So here is... how do I even want to describe this? This is what I would call the mix between what you do as a 3-hatching player with what you do as a 2-hatching player against a fast gas. So if I'm 2-hatching, let's say I did some sort of 2-hatch opening. Perfect example of this is Jaedong against Pusan. Just happened actually on Fighting Spirit. We saw a 2-hatch play by Jaedong against the 1-base play by Pusan. Jaedong got Hydralisk with speed and tech to the layer really fast. He did almost the identical thing that I just described with 3-hatching, except instead of getting the 3rd hatch earlier, he just got the gas earlier, so we got the Hydras earlier and the layer earlier, and then he got the Spire. I'm almost certain that's what's happened. For some reason, I'm slightly concerned that maybe he got the 3rd hatch, but I'll just roll with it, right? I'm almost certain he went for 2-hatch and did it in that exact same fashion. And the way it can work a little more comfortably if you go 2-hatch in that fashion is that you don't need to get the Hydralisk speed. You can just get the Hydralisk to hold off the Corsairs because you get the Spire so quickly. Now, what we're going to see in this game, what we're going to see right here, is that Hyuk got the 3rd hatch, then got the Hydra Den, and now he's going for the layer, and he's not going to be getting Hydralisk speed. And against virtually every possibility that comes out of a fast-gassing Protoss, not getting speed for Hydras ends up being just fine. You don't need to worry about it. Except when your opponent's going Reavers, and then it is so hard to deal with. Watch how much damage this Reaver is going to do. What's incredibly great about this game specifically is that it demonstrates how you have a play by Hyuk that is pretty good against everything but Reavers, right? It's pretty good against Corsairs, it's pretty good against Templar, it's pretty good against the 3-gate Dragoon thing I mentioned at the start. It's pretty good against all of those. But even then, this is a bad way to play because it is completely and totally vulnerable to this. What can you do about this Reaver now if you don't have enough Hydralisks and you can't position them properly? And the answer is you just lose everything. Yeah, take that. Made some Zerglings, not going to be effective. Absolutely not going to be effective at all. You know, it's kind of funny. Actually, what a lot of Zerg players will do is instead of getting the Spire against the fast-gassing player, they'll actually get Lurkers and get Zerglings with speed a little bit earlier. And the tactic they want to use is Zerglings with speed to delay the expansion, to kill the probe off, and then to get Lurkers fast enough that they can burrow Lurkers at the expansion before the cannons get done. So the Zerglings delay the cannons, and the Lurkers kind of complete the contain. So that's perhaps why we're seeing more Zerglings here. Of course, I don't know the answer, because we're never going to see this get off the ground at all. See, look, one Reaver shot, gone. It would have been very useful to have some Hydralisks in position in order to deal with this sort of aggression. And look, no speed whatsoever. These Hydralisks are never going to get anywhere near this Reaver. Look at this Reaver doing insane amounts of damage. And at this point, what on earth can Hyuk do? Yeah, he's getting the Spire up, but he runs the risk of losing this expansion. Now, that's kind of a misstep by any time to, lose that. But, he still ends up winning this game. I'm not actually going to focus too much on it. I mean, what else would I say? I'd be like, yeah, don't lose your Reaver like a dumbass. Or should I say, don't be like Horangi. Oh, man. Dude, Horangi, that guy loses so many shuttles. How does he... Oh, my God. That's like what he does for his team, is he gets in a position to win and he loses the shuttle. Watch like every game he's ever played against Stork, in particular the one that they just played on Match Point. Oh, God. Eye roll. Ugh. Sorry, I had to go on that brief tangent. Bummed me out. I want Horangi to do well. I like him. He's a cool guy. Nice haircut. Fashionable. Keeps losing shuttles. Can't believe it. I think a reasonable question to ask is, why Dragoons? Why am I teching to Dragoons now? Dragoons are great at this position. Dragoon Reaver, everyone's heard that standard sort of phrase, but let's think just a little bit why Dragoons are good. First of all, it abuses another range timing windows. I always talk about range timing windows, like 2 Hatch Mutalisks against Terran abuses the fact that Terran don't have range for their Marines quite so early. And if we have Dragoons with range against Hydralisks with not range, again, we're able to do so much more damage. You can actually even continue to back up, and the Hydralisks hardly do any damage. Another reason why they're good is the only units you're going to be against are Zerglings and Hydras early on. I mean, and Sunkens, but you kill those off. So the Dragoons really are able to micro extremely well against those. If they do get Mutalisks in time, you have Dragoons, and Dragoons are very good against Mutalisks if you can keep the mutant numbers low. And you have a decent amount of Dragoons, which is what happens if you opened with that early strategy. So Dragoons are an absolutely excellent choice. And again, part of the reason they're so good is because anytime we saw, probably around here in the... Oh, you can't see the YouTube status bar. Probably about 3 minutes ago, not probably that long, 2-3 minutes ago, we saw anytime building another gateway and getting range right after he got this Robo Bay down. He got range super early, and that's going to be instrumental in just finishing this base off. So this has happened to me more times than I can count. Developing a strategy that's really strong, that I really like, and then encountering a player who goes Dragoon Reaver and makes me go, oh, God. I now have to redo my entire strategy because it loses to this almost 100% of the time. And fortunately, I reworked my strategy and ended up looking completely different was about as effective against other things as was my original build, but I could hold off Dragoon Reaver like this. And I mean, look, this is just cleanup now. So, let me briefly say, see these Mutals? These Mutals are gonna help keep Hyuk alive for just a little bit of time. This is why, if you go 2 hatch against a 1 basing player, you tend to favor getting Mutalisks really early on, or getting the Spire really early on. Because you can do this sort of thing. Because really, Mutalisks are, can actually just kill Dragoons like this. So if you get enough Mutalisks early on, you can punish Dragoon Reaver equally well. But the thing is, if you get Mutalisks a little bit late, and you lose your expansion, so you're on 1 Geyser, you just cannot replenish near quickly enough. We haven't gotten to look at any times base, because the Observer, doesn't care, and wants to focus on the actions, such as that! Oh, that was so sweet. But if you look at the minimap, you can probably see a little bit more green there. Pretty sure that it's 3 hatches. Or pretty sure there's 3 gateways going on down there. Now, we get 1 more shot off from this Reaver, but then I want you to look at this Dragoon micro. Look how all these Dragoons are able to shoot at these Mutalisks. If you do the stop, hold position micro against Mutalisks with your Dragoons, you can actually do quite a bit more damage. So that's something that you don't talk about a lot, is the Dragoon versus Mutalisk hold position micro, because really it only comes into play in Dragoon Reaver against exactly something like this. Oh, look, he's bummed out. He's thinking, I gotta go back, and I gotta figure out how to stop Dragoon Reaver. So that way, he can successfully hold off an attack that virtually no one will ever do against him for the rest of his life. It's really funny. There's actually a checklist I have. I used to have it written down physically, but it used to be about 30 things that I hated dealing with in each matchup. And anytime I would develop a strategy that would, wipe out 90% of the game considerations. Oh, by the way, just let me briefly say that if you have no drones and you're about to lose your lair, you can go ahead and good game. There's no reason to stay in. There you go. But I used to have this list of all the different things that would annoy me in each matchup. And I would develop a strategy, and I'd be like, oh, I like this. It has a good mid-game plan, and I will be able to deal with the game once I hit to the mid-game. And that, great, I'm solid. But then I would go through this checklist of 30 things and be like, how do I deal with this? Okay, and then I'd make a slight adjustment. How do I deal with this and this and this and this and this and this? And, I mean, for like 25 of them, it was completely obvious, like, how do I deal with a proxy 2 gate? That sort of thing, And I mean, if you're going, like, for instance, like 3 hatch before pool, you're going to lose to a proxy 2 gate, so that's probably a pretty bad strategy. Unless, obviously, your opponent's not going to do that. Like, no, seriously. But when I say good strategy, I mean something that will get you to A- and A on Icy Cup playing against all sorts of players. But, most of them would be obvious. But for, like, 5 or so of them, it would be like, I'm not so sure, I got to test it. So, for instance, against Dragoon Reaver or something like that, I'd always be like, oh, man, I really should test this against Dragoon Reaver. And what would happen is I would be able to have a friend do this against my strategy and be like, oh man, you know what? I actually do get crushed. Ugh. And then I would rearrange everything and then go through my checklist of 30 things and make sure I could deal with all of it. So as a result, when I play on ladders, by employing these sorts of thoughts I put into the mid game and the early game, I have a very, very low loss percentage. But instead of being able to get lucky and beat players that are better than me, I actually have to work a lot harder to beat players that are better than me. Which I actually think is the right way to go about things. Well, let me rephrase that a little bit better. If you play in a risky way, you will lose to really bad players and potentially beat really good players. If you're playing really, really solidly, you might have a little bit more difficulty with those really good players, but you're always going to win 100% of the time against worse players. So, yes. Now we'll happily take some questions. Oh, yeah. 1A2A3A Pro asks, you mentioned the stop hold position Dragoon micro, but did not go into much detail. Can you do this quickly? Yeah, sure. So, for any of you who are not familiar with this, in terms of how quickly commands respond, patrol will cause your units to respond more quickly than hold position, which responds more quickly than stop, which responds more quickly than attack. That's, for instance, why, when we're against Scourge, we use Patrol on our Mutalisks, because our Mutalisks actually respond faster than if I hit Hold Position or Attack. So, for instance, with Dragoons, especially because Dragoon AI is really bad, a lot of people see Dragoons like back up, then shoot, then back up, then shoot. Your Dragoons are going to do a much better job if you back up and hit hold position, and back up and hit hold position. And an answer is, why not patrol? And the response is, for some reason it screws up. But hold position, micro, is just really standard with Dragoons. Just back up, hold position, back up, hold position. So that's the technique. What's actually happening, and I know everyone knows this, but I'm going to say it anyways. You're backing up, so that way you're outside of range of the units for a longer time. So, for instance, the Mutalisk has to be really close. So if you're constantly firing and backing up, the Mutalisks get off less shots. So that's what we got to see here. And that's, again, something you really only see in Dragoon Reaver against Mutalisks. Because most of the time, Mutalisks are just going to be running straight away from Dragoons. They're not even going to deal with it. But in this particular circumstance, you end up with Mutalisks directly attacking, which is very unusual. So can 4-gate Goon be as effective as Goon Reaver in PvZ? Absolutely. 4-gate Goon's given me a huge amount of troubles in the past. Here's the difference between the two, and we will follow it up after I hydrate. That was awesome. Oh, God, Liquid's awesome. Yeah. So here's the difference in my eyes between 4-gate and Dragoon Reaver. Both are effective. 4-gate can sometimes be a little bit more painful to deal with as Zerg. But 4-gate Goon does not have a good transition after it. There's no good opening that begins with 4-gate Dragoon, and then, what do you expand next? Do you get Templar? Do you get Observers? All these sorts of things. If you're going Dragoon Reaver, you have the flexibility to expand. You have the flexibility to start getting Observers. More of your tech is completed with Dragoon Reaver, so you can do a lot more things. Moreover, if you do end up going for Dragoon Reaver, you have the opportunity to do harassment and put more pressure on your opponent in less ways that... you can do more pressure on your opponent with sort of harassment and stuff. You don't need to rely on a huge front push, although that is a definite possibility. If you go 4-gate Goon, you kind of have to rely on the fact that you can just walk in there and kill your opponent. But if any of you are looking for ways to experiment that are not early expanding in Protoss vs. Zerg, you can go fast Corsair into 3-gate Goon. Is a very easy sort of like 1-2 punch. I call it a 1-2 punch because you have to win on the next step. You can go, Corsair into 4-gate Zealot with legs is another really easy one. Try doing more stuff with Dragoons. Actually, Dragoons have given me quite a lot of trouble early game. Like if a 2-gating player opens with 2-gate Zealot straight into 3, even 4-gate Goon is a nightmare. Sanjong is a very old school player. We're talking like 1999 old school, and that was his entire gameplay. And it was horrific to deal with. And I would love to see a return of that. Oh, God, there's like 15 incredible questions. I'm going to take a question from Dr. Helvetica because I thoroughly enjoy his articles on Team Liquid. Pusan played a game against Jaedong where he went for a lot of early DTs. Isn't that kind of bad if your whole game plan relies on the opponent making a mistake? That is a great question. I want to reword a little bit of it because it says, is it bad if your entire game plan relies on your opponent making a mistake? I don't know if Pusan's strategy necessarily relied on his opponent having a mistake. I assume that there is some stable follow-through from that. Because you'll note that he dropped 3 Dark Templar and attacked with them. And I'm sure if you had 4 Dark Templar, you just would have straight up attacked. Yeah, Dark Templar are useful if your opponent doesn't have detection, but especially early on, as we see in Anytime vs. Yellow on our point, Dark Templar can do a lot of damage and just kind of hold their own. So I would have loved to see him just continuing to ferry units up there and winning the game that way, or just crushing his opponent that way. I have trouble making a good judgment on Pusan's opening because if you think about it, he's completed a lot of his important tech. He has the robotics facility, so he can already go straight to Observers. He has Templar, so he can get Archons and Speed Zealots and all that stuff. He can expand, and when he expands and gets his Forge, he can already start upgrading the +1. There's a lot of interactions going on there that I really, really like. It's that early game I'm worried about, and even though he lost pretty quickly to Jaedong, I don't know if that's telling enough, because a lot of times when you do these sorts of plays, you lose early or you win late. And that's normal. That doesn't mean that, oh, I barely won and, oh, I lost so easily. That's just where the weak point and the strong point is. So, you know what? I would just say I'd need to play against Poussin a million times and see what else he has in store. I really loved it. It looked creative. I wanted to see more. Just want to say I had to briefly mute the chat because there were so many questions I liked that I wanted to make sure I hit all of them. This one, this is a very long answer, but I'm gonna compact it down because I think it's useful enough, and we have time. Joe ICK asks, "What is your advice to a newbie trying to develop a strategy?" My advice is pick one matchup on one map. Begin with the mid-game, just a horrible, simple mid-game strategy. As long as it's there, stick to it. And don't make drastic changes unless you've played 10 games with the exact same set of rules. So, for instance, if I say something like, what's an example? Okay, here, really simple example. On this map, I want to have a big Hydra Lurk army in the middle against my Terran opponent. Very simple. Nothing sophisticated about what I said. And in this game, I'm going to have the following buildings in the mid-game. Yeah. And I'm just going to do that 10 games in a row. I'm going to pick an opening, I'm going to do it 10 games in a row. And if I'm losing real bad to some other things, that's when I start making a bunch of adjustments. And then I get a new set, and then I say, all right, cool, I'm going to do this again 10 times in a row. And by restricting myself to one map, one matchup, one strategy, and I'm declaring what it is I'm going to do, I know what it is I'm adjusting, and I have a lot less to think about, so I can think more clearly. If I'm doing all three matchups, it's a little bit harder to improve, but obviously play all the matchups if you're not in the mood to improve a ton, because, we play StarCraft for fun, so we may as well keep doing that. Captain Platypus says, is it possible to go one base in Protoss for Zerg without sacrificing mid-game power? For example, going 3-gate Goon or Goon Reaver and then expanding afterwards. I absolutely think it's possible to not sacrifice mid-game power. I think the reason it feels so easy to sacrifice mid-game power is because it's very easy to just get Templar, High Templar. And if you have a low gateway count, you'll get High Templar, and you'll definitely be defended, but you can't really do much with the High Templar. Dragoons and Reavers are very versatile units. They can do a lot of defense, but they can also do a lot of offense. If I'm against an opponent who opened up for some very aggressive Goon Reaver build, first of all, my economy's screwed up. It's really bad. Once it gets sort of rolling and I'm feeling more confident, I'm allowed to take one expansion because I know the Protoss is coming out pretty soon with his next little batch of stuff. And when I take this next one expansion, it's not the way it feels when I'm against an early expanding player, because I'm going to have like 5 hatches, I'm going to have upgrades, I'm going to have everything for Hydras. When I take this one expansion, I generally only have 4 hatches, including that expansion, and maybe I have an evolution chamber at that point. But those are the sorts of things that are going to be a really scary Protoss mid-game, is if he opened up with a higher gateway count early on. What was the name of that player? There's a player, like a super old school player who would just get tons of gateways early on and just keep the pressure up all game long. And, it's very easy to make a mistake and lose early on. Well, I don't want to say easy, but he would make mistakes and lose really early on. And it might look silly, but he would play solidly most of the time and would end up with these just nightmare situations for Zerg all game long. Yeah. Oh, I gotta answer this question. 1A2A3A Pro says, off topic, what language/API did you use for your platformer game? I use Unity, which is the best game engine I have ever used, and it's free. It is free to use the software that I use to create that. If you want to get the professional version, which has a bunch of extra features, you have to pay money. But the indie version, which is still incredible, free. Use that. And I program in JavaScript and C#. So yes, for that one. I like this question by Scrix. I'm going to answer the second one first. Scrix asked, should Poussin have focused on the Reaver, or excuse me, should Hyuk have focused on the Reaver with the Mutas? Nah, the Dragoons would have wiped them out anyways. I mean, you want to kill the Reaver, but it was inevitable. His doom was right around the corner. No need to focus too much on that. But it said, would placing an Overlord between either base, would placing an Overlord either between bases or just scout in that situation be good? That is the sort of subtle adjustment that helps you drop your loss percentage. So if we look back at this map, what Scrix is saying is if we are here and our opponent's here, what about placing Overlords right in this area? Wouldn't this stop? Wouldn't this help a little bit? That's the sort of stuff that will help drop your losses just by a little bit, but you just got to make sure you have the units there to get in the way. Because if you don't have enough Hydralisks, what's the point? You just get to see the shuttle come in, you do, hey, shuttle, and then you get to leave the game. Because you lost all your drones. So yeah. Let's see here. Colbert asked. Oh yeah, Colbert says, Day 9, the nation would like to know, what happened to Hyuk's first Overlord? After going to the middle, shouldn't he, if he have had time to scout around for what he was doing? Let's actually take a look back at that, because that's actually an interesting question. I think what happened is he convinced himself of something that wasn't actually happening. So so here's the Overlord. It's wandering towards the middle. And he scouts here. And it looks like he's continuing to scout in this direction. Look at this fork. He has one Overlord still heading here. He has one Overlord heading down. And he has this other drone heading here. I think he still is not entirely sure what his opponent's position is. Because a lot of times you're heading up here because you want to expand. What is Hyuk doing? I'm having a real hard time deciphering this. Maybe someone could point this out to me. I have a real hard time getting this. So there it was. I couldn't see it on the minimap, but he saw the Zealot. He's not going to be expanding anywhere at all, and probably these Overlords are in position to deal with some sort of early expander. And only now does he get to here, and at this point it doesn't matter what he does with his Overlords. He's just already screwed. So I think the key is maybe to do some sort of earlier scouting, or maybe to open up with like an overpool. So that way I can not only check on what my opponent's doing if he goes 2 gate or 1 gate, but I can also put pressure on my early expanding opponent. See, now that's how I'm dealing with those. Every time I'm making an adjustment, I'm comparing it against these 3 different possibilities. So, So 1A, 2A, 3A Pro says, if one base play is viable, haha, you're going to make me, alright. This is a challenge question. If one base play is viable and a good surprise tactic in Protoss vs Zerg, why do we see 90% of players go fast expand? This question is going to have quite an answer, and I'm going to put it on hold to answer a question. Oh, this is the worst time to answer it. I'm going to answer a question that I meant to answer last week but forgot. So I'm going to come right back to that question about viability. But first, I was saying last week that Devourers are a support unit. They are not something that you should mass up. So this happens a lot of times in late game Protoss vs Zergs, and I want to vomit every time I see this. It just depresses me. Okay, so here's the situation. Our Protoss opponent has 24 Corsairs, a lot of Corsairs, and I'm not exaggerating. He actually literally has that many, and this happens a lot of times in late games. So Protoss has a bunch of Corsairs, and I just hit Greater Spire, and I have 24 Mutalisks. Let's assume I have infinite resources. What should I do? Most players say, well, morph all of them into Devourers. That's what you do. A Devourer is a better unit than a Mutalisk. Wrong. A Devourer is a support unit. So the way the Acid Spore works is that whenever you have something that's stuck with the Acid Spore, it takes 1 additional damage per spore. So if I do 1 damage and my opponent has 9 Acid Spores on him, I'm going to do 10 damage. Because 1 plus 9 is oftentimes 10. So let's think about this now. If I am if I have Devours against a bunch of Corsairs. If I just have Devours and they all fire, the Devours do 25 damage. Now they're going to do 34 damage. Alright, that's reasonable. But Devours attack really slowly. If we have some Devours, though, and we manage to get them up to 6, 7, 8, 9 Acid Spores, and all the rest of our stuff is Mutalisks, think now about how much damage this does. The Mutalisks originally go 9, 3, 1 with their bounces, but now they're going to go 18, 12, 10 at a very, very fast fire rate. That is way better than the extra Devour. And in fact, what you'll see is that if I have just 6 or 7 Devours and all the rest Mutalisks, you smash through Corsairs. It's not even close. Completely, totally one-sided. So that is a very important fact to keep tucked away in your brain. So your question is, why is it that we see 90% of players fast expand? I'm gonna finish up with this question. So this is gonna be the last question we take today, and I'm happy to take more one-based questions in future casts. So the question is, why do we see most players fast expand? Well, once upon a time, all players one-based. And all players used fancy-dancy strategies. You know, we got Boxer doing his sick micro. We got what are some of the cool things that happen? We have Yellow doing all his really fancy drops. We have Junwei being called the acupuncturist, the massage Zerg, because he drops in such key locations all around. Anyone who did something fancy and sexy looking was the champion. All of a sudden, there was this era where I Love Uv came about, and we had all these players who realized that if you just had a lot of shit, you could win against these fancy players. It didn't matter if he was doing these drops in key locations. You would kill the drops, and then you'd take your 8 control groups and you'd go kill him. And that would be the end of the game. And it was really funny to see back then. I doubt anyone remembers this, but everyone just started macroing. All StarCraft games became about macro. It was turtle, 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 turtle. Here comes a huge army, and that was it. And actually, all these forum threads started popping up going, is strategy dead? Is StarCraft just a macro game? And people just believed, like, oh my god, StarCraft is ruined now, because everyone's just going to macro from now on. And now, there are bits of truth to both of these macroing players and to these players who love doing these fancy stuff. So first of all, fancy ninja stuff can definitely get you a slight extra advantage. But macro is going to really be the underlying thing that helps you, tip the scale in your favor. And what happened is, if you early expand, you're kind of guaranteed all these units. And a lot of your decision-making afterwards has a lot of units as sort of the benchmark to it. And what happens is you win a lot of games really easily. So what happens is you get used to the fact that even if you make a few mistakes, you can win very easily with just having units. And of course at the higher levels this isn't true, but at the lower levels this is very much so the case. So let's think now if we're doing a one-base sort of play. You don't have a lot of units throughout the whole game. You get a lot of units early on, and then you kind of slowly add them on as time progresses. But you don't get as many easy wins early on. So I think what ends up happening, the reason that 90% of players end up early expanding, is that they learn how easy it is to just have stuff. So for instance, if I want to take a third base after early expanding, most of the time I take it by having a lot of stuff, like for instance Protoss versus Zerg. Protoss player gets 4 or 5 gateways, gets Zealots and Archons, moves out, defended third, no problem. Easiest thing in the world. You did it. You have a defended third expansion. If I open Dragoon Reaver, well, taking my second is pretty scary. I mean, so once I get that set up, and, if you're a good player, it will get itself set up. And then how do we take a third? Well, I have to have been putting so much pressure on my opponent after I took my second that now my third is okay. A lot of players don't want to do that. A lot of players just like the idea of just getting stuff and taking expansions, so on and so forth. So, in other words, a lot of the big decisions are a lot more clear how you go about doing them when you early expand, and might be slightly more opaque if you are if you are one basing. But I love one basing so much because the games are fun. It's so fun to two-gate your player. Because first of all, a lot of times you'll just win. You'll just snap his neck in half. And he'll just be like, "Ugh," and he'll get mad at you and curse you out in whatever language he's talking in. Because on Icy Cup there are many players from all around the world. And even if you lose, if the two-gate doesn't work, you start, building up more and more zealots at the front, and let's say you transition straight into three-gate dragoons, exactly like Sanjong. You're putting more pressure on the front. He has these sunken colonies turtle, but then you have dragoons firing down the front. And finally, he gets Zerglings and Lurkers to start pushing back, but suddenly you have Reavers and Observers, and you're continuing pounding at his front. And right at the time when he's just now comfortable holding off all this pressure at the front, and he's feeling good, you've taken an expansion, and now it's sort of an even game. You get to the same spot that you would have if neither of you had done any aggression, but you got to do this really sort of fun aggression in the first place. So that's why I love two gates, I love fast gases, I love Reavers in particular, are a big favorite unit of mine. So, yeah, guys, please go and be merry, be more like Anytime, use more strategies, and definitely start one basing. That is the end of Day 9 Daily, number 24. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We will not be having a cast tomorrow, and definitely start sending me your replays in my message box at teamliquid.net, because next week we're going to look at some low-level replay players, so that way we can really focus on how to learn, how to improve, how to do all these sorts of things from the point of view of a very low-level player. So thanks so much, everyone. Yeah. That about finishes it up. Ta-ta.